Hi everyone, and welcome to a Reheated Cup with Laurie and Bell Acoustics by baby Ella in her playpen while we record this episode. So I just recently did a blog post on nursing essentials and briefly talked about why I recommend certain things and the fact that both of my nursing experiences with Ella and Caroline were very different. And then just some products and things that I didn't realize I needed the first time around, but were really helpful the second time around. So I wanted to talk a little bit about my nursing journey. So I want to start off by pointing out that no journey is the same. And so obviously my experiences were very different between Ella and Caroline, and some of the advice that I'm giving and gave may or may not be relevant to you, but I wanted to tell you guys a little bit about my experiences. So with Caroline, I had no idea, it was my first baby. I, saw all of the, propaganda per se, online and social media and just throughout our culture that I needed to nurse my baby. She needed to be breastfed. And if I couldn't do it, this was not a good thing. So I felt a ton of pressure. A ton of pressure going into having Caroline to make sure that I was nursing and that she was not formula fed. So that aside, and that just cultural pressure, especially with the first child, I feel like with Ella, I started to kind of, I knew a little bit more of what to expect and was kind of just all screw everyone else, I'm just going to do me, which is always the way to go in motherhood, in my opinion. So with Caroline, I had some complications having her and was in the hospital for a couple days and started nursing her, not right away, but, as soon as I could. And she was not super great at latching. I know, I agree, Ella. It was not good. It was tough. It was hard. I couldn't get her to latch. And when she would, it was so painful. So one of the things, you kind of assume it's going to hurt a little bit, but I will say I had no idea just how much it would hurt in those first couple days, even weeks. So there were definitely some things the second time around that I was able to prepare for in that sense. So the other thing that I wasn't super ready for was I had been nursing for a couple days before I brought her home from the hospital. And I think it was a day or two in. My husband was already back at work, and my dad was actually there helping. And I remember waking up, and I felt like Dolly freaking Parton. My boobs were huge. I was just looking in the mirror, and they were huge, big, and hard, and they hurt. And I know, it was seriously intense, and I had no idea what to do. I was like, Dad, I don't know what to do. He said, call your mom. So I called my mom, and she's like, hop in the shower, try to self-express, and grab your pump because your milk has dropped. And I was like, my milk has dropped? I've been feeding her for days. What are you talking about? But at first you start off with colostrum, which I knew that, but once your body starts to produce milk and switches over and starts producing more, it drops per se. And every experience with this is different. Again, with Caroline, it was oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. With Ella, I noticed the drop, and it was definitely boom, but not quite as intense as it was with Caroline. And I have no idea why that was different, but it was. So there's that experience. And so that's when I first actually started pumping. And so I started pumping to relief, but then, obviously stored. I was planning on going back to work at least, and did end up going back at 3 months with Caroline. But so I started pumping and storing because everyone was like, well, make sure you store because you're going to need the milk when you go back to work. So that's one thing I did do. And for anybody working and non-working moms, I highly recommend that you pump and store as soon as you can, really. I mean, as soon as you get home from the hospital, if you're waking up in the morning and you're, feeding the baby and you have some extra, just pump it, save it, and store it. Because not only is it good for when you're ready to go back to work and you need to have some extra milk supply, but it's also good for date night or to have dad help with late night or early morning feeding. So having some milk on hand and being able to kind of train your baby to start using a bottle, even if it's just like once a month or every 3 months, is ideal. Okay, so you start pumping. Woohoo! Second time around, I had a smaller pump. The first time around, I had one of those bigger cube Medela, and then now I have a freestyle. Ironically, with Caroline, I had to pump and went back to work and was pumping all the time. And with Ella, I did in those first couple months just because I had surplus of supply, but since I've been home with her, I haven't really had to pump that much. So, of course, I have the more portable, nicer pump the second time around and don't need it, but that's just life, right? So, your milk drops, you need to start pumping. With Caroline, I was pumping and storing. I thought I was pumping and storing a lot, but to be honest, so when I went back to work, I went back at 3 months, and unfortunately, like I mentioned, Caroline, it was hard to nurse with her. She started to get the hang of it, but it was still really painful. She wasn't a great latcher, but I stuck with it for the first 3 months while I was home with her. When I went back to work and I tried nursing her, she went on what they call apparently a nursing strike. So she all of a sudden refused to nurse. Yeah. So a nursing strike basically is what it sounds like. Your baby is done nursing. She wants the bottle or nothing. In our case, luckily, she was taking a bottle. But she went on a nursing strike, and I tried and tried and tried and was not able to continue to nurse. So Caroline being on a nursing strike was a pain in multiple ways, and hopefully this never happens to you, and thank goodness this did not happen with Ella, but she literally refused to nurse. I would come home before Jake would get home. I'd pick her up, come home, and I'd sit on the couch and try to nurse her, and she would literally just scream and scream and scream at me, and I tried for weeks, and what seemed like months, but I think it was only weeks. And I would do everything I could. I would come home and I would start pumping so that, it was easier for her to latch, and my milk had already dropped. And I would use, they have these nipple shield things that make it seem like a bottle. I did everything I could, and she just wouldn't nurse. And my husband would come home and she would be screaming and crying, and I would be crying because I had so much anxiety surrounding nursing and being able to provide milk for my daughter and give her what I thought was best. And all that pressure was literally just too much. I was melting down every day I would get home from work. I was super upset and super depressed because I thought, this is my fault. I left my baby, I went back to work, and now she doesn't want to nurse. She doesn't want to have that bonding time. And for me, nursing, and for a lot of women, I think nursing is that time that you get to bond with your child. And it's something that, most of us, if we can, want to try to do it as much as possible. Some women hate nursing. So their experience is different. But for me, I hated it, but I felt obligated. But I also enjoyed those late night moments and those moments when I returned home or the early morning where I got to spend with my daughter. And so I felt that I had. So with this overwhelming feeling of failure, my husband came home one day to us crying together and was just like, why are you doing this? You need to stop. Stop, just stop. Just feed her the bottle. So that's what I started doing. But the obnoxious part is I was like, no, she will still have my milk. I will still nurse. I'm not going to formula feed her. I'm going to provide her with this awesome nutrients that she needs. And so I started pumping exclusively. Yeah. So I was already pumping at work, obviously every 2 to 3 hours. And for all those women out there who are work pumping, oh my gosh, cheers to you. It is so much work. So for the first, I guess you would say 9 months, because she was 3 months when I went, or almost 3 months when I went back to work. So from then on, I was pumping all day long, and then I was getting home, and instead of being able to nurse my baby, I would have to pump and bottle feed her while I was pumping, because I was producing and overproducing with Caroline. I mean, I constantly, I had a ton of milk, which was great, but I was constantly producing. And I think it's because when you're pumping at work every 2 hours and using a double pump, your body tends to do that. It'll overproduce a lot. So I found myself feeding her a bottle and pumping at the same time. So that was definitely a challenge, and definitely trying. Okay, someone just really wanted to join us today. She's got some crazy nap hair. But anyways, so like I mentioned, I was exclusively pumping and started to dry up and run a little bit low with Caroline, and was super stressed out. And it wasn't until she was just at 12 months, I think it was right before her birthday, I ran out almost completely. So my doctor told me, go buy some formula and wean her with formula and breast milk. And then once she hit 1 year, she said to start weaning her from the formula and do whole milk. And so that's what we did. So we really only had to buy 2 cans of formula, which, by the way, is super expensive for those of you who aren't already aware. I'm really glad I did decide to pump for Caroline. And being a pumping mom is so stressful. It's so much work. There's so many parts to clean. I mean, all this comes apart and you have to clean all of it. And when you're working and you're storing milk and you're creating bottles, there's just literally you have a sink full of bottles every day to wash. It is a pain in the butt. So one of the things I was dreading most about when this one arrived was kind of going back to that. So I think we've been blessed since I've been home with her and we moved, and I've been working from home. It has been such a blessing in that sense, because I haven't had to do any of that. So that was my experience with Caroline. So after Caroline, along comes this little cutie. Hi, yeah, hey, Ella. She wants to say hi. You have bedhead. Okay, so this little cutie came along, and I was so much more confident. So I was literally ready to go. And to be honest, I was so excited to nurse her, because I felt with Caroline that I was robbed of the experience. When I went back to work and she went on a nursing strike, I didn't get to experience that, and I was bummed about it. Like I said, it really affected me. And so with her, I was determined to make it work. So recap, Ella was born, started nursing right away, and she did a really good job. It hurt, but I was ready. We were ready. I had my nipple creams, my pads, my shields. I mean, I had everything that I needed in the hospital with me to make sure that we had a good experience. So started pumping, started storing. One thing that I had with Ella that I didn't have with Caroline, like I said, Caroline, I had all the milk. It was literally raining milk all the time. I would wake up, I would soak through my sheets, I would soak through my pads. We had a lot of milk, which with her at first I had a decent amount, but it quickly leveled out. And after the first 3 months, I was still at home nursing with her exclusively. She got a bottle maybe a handful of times. But I did notice that my milk supply started evening out, and I was making, just enough to feed her, which freaked me out a little bit. So like I mentioned, one of the things I did not have with Caroline, but I did have with Ella, is a little bit of the drying up of the milk. But then the supply came back, and it kind of does that every once in a while to get a little bit low. So in a nutshell, that is kind of an overview of my nursing experience with Caroline and little Miss Ella J. We're still going strong. She's eating regular food, but she's still nursing before every nap in the morning and before bed. And I absolutely love nursing her. And I love the time that it gives to bond with her. So I didn't necessarily intend on doing this, but she was getting fussy, and guess what she wanted? So before I go today, I just want to say hang in there. Keep up the good work. You know, if you're nursing or you're just starting your journey, do what is best for you and for baby. Because I know we all talk about what's best for baby's health and what we should be doing for baby. But think about mom too. You know, nursing can be extremely stressful. It can cause a lot of women anxiety and postpartum depression. And while it is amazing and nature's gift to us mothers and bonding time, it's not necessarily the same or easy for everyone. If you have any questions or need some support, feel free to reach out. I am happy to provide that. Everyone have a good day.